Good evening and welcome to the Monday, April 1st Rules Committee meeting. Alderman Braithwaite, Chair. We have a quorum. First we'll take citizen comments. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speakers, starting with Dan Coyne. Thank you. 2 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Dan Coyne, and I live in the 9th Ward. Since you are spending time today revising and discussing the council rules on public comments and ethics, I want to share about my experience with the recent public comment at Ridgeville Park District. On March 14, during public comments, Alderman Rainey spoke for 8 minutes during our Ridgeville Park District Board of Commissioners meeting. I have had the honor of serving on this board these past 6 years. One of the most concerning comments spoken by Alderman Rainey was, quote, "Any black person who wants a porta potty in their backyard is stupid," unquote. She went on to suggest that the board should raise taxes via a referendum instead of using porta potties in our parks. Ms. Rainey also stated that Commissioner Rob Beatty doesn't wear big boy pants in his role as our vice president of the board, and that he has, quote, sat on his big boy bottom for the last 6 years doing nothing. Well, I disagree. My African-American neighbors like to relieve themselves with dignity and privacy just like everyone else. Furthermore, my neighbors of color are not stupid. Mr. Beatty, the very first African-American elected to Ridgeville Park District Commissioners, has honorably served our community, and all of us are better because of it. City Council, your silence and filing of your peers' unethical behaviors, racial slurs, and outright bullying must end. This citizen, at least, will not remain silent. Not for anyone, regardless of their perceived power, who treats our citizens with such disdain. Today's rules, discussions, and improvements cannot remain silent on this problem. Do you agree with Alderman Rainey that Evanston's black citizens are stupid? Do you believe her claim that Mr. Robert Beatty's leadership has been worthless? Is this the kind of behavior we want from our city members? I'm an elected government servant, and just like you, I affirm to abide by the constitutions of the United States and the Constitution of this state of Illinois. I am guessing that we all agree that our First Amendment rights of free speech are the bedrock of this great experiment in democracy, including Ms. Rainey's words. However, when an elected official uses racist, hateful, and libel words, she needs censorship. She needs accountability. Perhaps it's time that we examine ourselves collectively and discover a more acceptable means to govern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Braithwaite, I think this is one of those times when an alderman gets to respond. There's a provision where aldermen get to respond.
You'd like to take privilege?
May I have that privilege?
Yes, yes, Alderman.
So, you had to have been there. I think those of you who know me know Dan Coyne, know that he is a provocateur. And what you heard right now, you had to have been there. And as a matter of fact, many members of the Ridgeville board objected to his use of that camera during that board meeting because there had been a motion that he not be allowed to use that camera because the Ridgeville board had used their own camera. However, he knew that I was coming because I was coming to respond to a vicious, hateful video that was placed online and mentioned me several times for some ungodly reason, I don't even know. And his point was that the Ridgeville board was racist and all sorts of things because they would not allow porta potties in parks. And my comments were directed mostly to Mr. Coyne, not to Mr. Beatty. Mr. Beatty sort of goes along for the ride with Mr. Coyne. And what I said was that black people, white people, any people of any color, race, creed, or ethnic background or income level did not want porta potties in their backyard. I said anybody who wanted a porta potty in their backyard was stupid. I stand by that comment. If you want a porta potty in your backyard, then you've got to screw loose, quite frankly. And I suggested that the way to go was to raise money through a referendum, to go to the taxpayers and say, and as a matter of fact, my comments were almost exactly, you are not raising enough money in the Ridgeville Park District to really provide for decent infrastructure. The way to go, and the Ridgeville members, I'm one of them, I'm a taxpayer in Ridgeville, perhaps we support raising more money to provide ourselves with better infrastructure. What have you two done in the last 6 years to provide for us? You've done nothing but complain that the board does nothing. You are the majority on the board. You've done nothing. Do something. As a matter of fact, I was really good. You should have been there. You really should have been there. And, you know, they continued to complain. So that was my argument. That was my argument. Not that Bob Beatty was a bad guy, but that their whole approach was bad. And I stick by every single word I said. It had nothing to do with the way he just presented it. As usual, Dan Coyne is wrong.
Claire Kelly, next speaker.
She wasn't there. I don't think.
Good evening, Claire Kelly. I want to address the December 3rd Rules Committee meeting, not the time that it was allotted, but about the what legal presented as the recommendations from the Board of Ethics. Only 2 of the recommendations were presented that evening, and one very important one has been left out. And I ask that you have the discussion and vote on it, and that was, and I can read it to you right here. It was never in, it wasn't in the packet, and it was the recommendation by the Ethics Board that in the event that elected officials or city officials or staff receive an email from a private citizen by a constituent and they choose and they are going to forward it to a third party, that the original author of that email should be copied. And that was never presented. And that concerns me because without that discussion, there's no way we can ensure residents that sort of thing isn't going to continue to go on. What happens, and sometimes it's, you know, forwarded for perfectly benign, maybe even beneficial purposes, but we've seen a lot of demeaning remarks made, putting residents down. So this really isn't a very kosher practice that's going on with our city council where emails are forwarded. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable recommendation by the Board of Ethics, and I was really hoping to see that discussed and then voted on to ensure citizens that when they email, they'll know if it's going to be forwarded. It's simply to copy them. And again, if that discussion doesn't happen, what happens is when aldermen forward residents' emails and put them down and demean them, this casts a chill on our civic, you know, our willingness to participate civically, which is something you would want to encourage your residents to do, to reach out to their elected officials. But when we know there's a good chance that, you know, our emails could be sent off and we could be made fun of and mocked, which we've seen, and that was the reason that they made this recommendation, was because Nancy Sreenan brought it to that was her complaint was about being mocked in an email, and she and others have been mocked too. So I ask that you please discuss this and vote on this so we can be assured as residents that you will follow this recommendation by our Board of Ethics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just think in a moment of reflection after that, I have those same concerns, and our concerns are voiced, but on the other side of that is the number of emails that are FOIA'd. So you may not see it the same way, but I understand your concern. Thank you. Charles Sutton. Charles. Oh, Carlos, sorry. My apologies.
Good evening, members of the Rules Committee. Carlos Sutton, 1821 Darrell Avenue, Evanston, Illinois, Ward 5. I'm here this evening to address any kinds of amendment that might be made to consideration of citizen comment. At this time, I don't think there should be any movement of any kind to limit or diminish the public's ability to make comments at committee or city council. The sufficient law should remain without any changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Betty Esther.
Good evening. Speaking on item number 4 and a couple other items, the discontinuation of Administration and Public Works Committee. I read what was in here and clearly do not understand why you do not want to have the discussions on the bids and things and the money and how it's spent, what comes in, what you're buying, what you're selling, which all takes place in the Public Works Committee. Now, I understand and realize when you're trying to convene and to curtail your time, but I've been at AMPW meetings when there have been a long meeting, the discussion, and who was at that meeting. There was a developer submitting something, staff submitted a report, and there was maybe one staff person. And the P&D meeting afterwards started about 7:30 something to 8. Y'all discussed it, which was good. But people at that meeting didn't come to say anything, but they had the opportunity to see what you was talking about and hearing it. Discontinuing this is disallowing and taking away their right to hear and see how you spend their money. The setting and starting off the city council meeting, they've been all over the place. It should be a set time. If it's such that you can't do it, then you might want to think about having them on different days. Your P&D and AP&W can be maybe that Monday you have the council meeting that Tuesday. The AP&W and the P&D meeting would be where the committee, the people in the community could have their discussion and everything, and you can discuss later. If you don't want to do that, then we have a system that is poor, and we need to live with it. And to the community, speaking at a meeting, I was at a zoning meeting and plan, and they had a zoning change that they was there. So I was there, I talked, we kind of like back and forth, and one of the zoning commission came to me and said, well, I'm glad you're here and you brought this up because you gave us a lot to think about. What they talked about, I did forward it to Alderman Fisk, and it has to do, with a change in residential care and what the staff was referring and holding that decision on, a decision that's waiting to come from Springfield that has nothing to do with the reason that you was looking at it as to what the distance should be between there. I think we need to stop rushing things. It's okay to have it. Don't have to have it 1 week, we have it introductory, the next
ask
week
you
we
to
have
wrap
to
up, Ms.
stop.
Esther.
You can have it maybe the 4th meeting, and then you might not have to have them so long. So having them right behind each other for a decision is another way to handle this. Discuss it 2 meetings, vote on it on the 3rd meeting.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
your comments. Ray Friedman. And our last speaker will be Doreen Price.
Good evening, everyone. Before I make my comments, I just wanted to make a quick request. I saw the video of last week's city council meeting, and when the video came through, my head was like really shiny.
Your head is still shiny, Ray.
Can they fix it? Can they just please?
I'll make sure that our staff gets on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy April Fool's Day. Okay, seriously. We're still asking for feedback on public comments and wanted to know if you discussed a format that would allow this to take place. I appreciate all of your updates on Robert Crown, but we are still waiting to hear how this will affect our budget. As of today's date, do we have a balanced budget? Do we need to start looking for ways to cut expenditures? I thought we were supposed to work together as a community and make decisions together as a community. It is very disturbing to hear people say that council members make the final decisions and said in such a way that makes me feel that we don't have a choice or a voice in what decisions are made by council. Why are you continuing to change the rules for public comment? I don't think this follows the purpose and intent of this process. Do you feel this will shorten your meetings? I agree that council meetings are too long. I don't know how they can be shorter. I agree with Ms. Esther. When the packet is 500 to 600 pages long and you're only given 2 to 3 days to read, digest, and make a decision, I believe the process of discussing and making a decision would be so much more efficient and beneficial to everyone if you would consider the input from everyone and be able to make compromises before it comes to city council meetings. It looks like the process is flawed and needs to be fixed. Most projects are discussed for months and some for years. It seems it would be to everyone's benefit to have the community input throughout the process instead of limiting it. Please let us know what we can do to help. By the way, I didn't receive any notice for tonight's Rules Committee meeting, and I was wondering why that would. I have notices for every kind of whatever's going on in Evanston. I received notices for it, and that was missing. So can we make our motto, the city that works together? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Doreen Price.
For just a few speakers, we're all on target in terms of our concerns about wanting to participate, and I think you've seen good faith efforts on the speakers involved, regardless of their point of view, that they do a lot of research and a lot of work in a very short period of time. And I've mentioned it before that I thought that the city council meetings should be held more often. Right now, twice a month, maybe. If they were held every week, and forget about this, we don't have enough on our agenda. How about we balance the agendas, which I think was a great suggestion that Ray made. And also Betty. In terms of introduction and action, there's been way too many that the action was filed on introduction, and you just have to go through the agendas and you'll see that that's been the kind of the hallmark of what's been going on. With regard to the amount of time, it does not reflect the importance that the city council is supposed to have on community input. And I know there are people on the council who do, but I don't understand the people who don't. And I don't know if it's coming from the city manager or not, but if the letter with regard to public comment about we got to find a way to shorten it doesn't have, well, public comment is important, we have a way to shorten it, but what are the proactive approaches to get more public comment before the city council? That was not listed. Whenever something's important to you and you're going to cut something back, even in a budget, you have plans to support what it is that you're trying to do that you're cutting back on in a different way. That was not done, and that is not process, and it's not fair, and it's not including the citizens, and it's excluding the people who have a hard time writing and would rather speak here. And if more people did that, you would be more inclusive, and this is hard on people who do speak to do this. So if you want to be inclusive and you have all these goals, this is really working against your very own goals in every single category that you have, budget, equity, everything else. So thank you very much, because I do believe in your goals. I do totally.
Thank you. All right, that's it for citizens' comments. Is there a motion to approve the regular meetings of January 22nd, 2019? It's been properly moved and seconded. Seeing no lights, no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. The next item, number 4, discontinuation of Administrative Public Works Committee and setting of a start time for city council meetings.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good evening. On page 8 of your packet is a minute excerpt from the October 1st Rules Committee meeting. This item was originally placed there. I provided the information for you for your information. Again, the conversation, as you'll see from October 1st, went a little bit further afield with issues regarding the Administration Public Works Committee. The committee asked that all this come back at your December meeting. That did not occur, so it is here for discussion this evening. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I have one light. Alderman Rainey.
Yeah. I don't have any questions, but I'd like to offer some information and argue my case for absolutely not eliminating that committee and folding the information and the actions into the council meeting instead. First of all, the items that appear on the Administration and Public Works Committee agenda are all the items that have to do with spending money of the city of Evanston. Every penny that we spend, for the most part, come before the Administration and Public Works Committee. And the interesting thing about that is it only comes there once. There aren't previous meetings. For example, there aren't other committees of the council or meetings, citizen committees that meet prior to the Council Administration and Public Works Committee that deal with those issues and then recommend or advise the council on that spending. Comes to the Administration and Public Works Committee, and that's where citizens come and hear the deliberation of the council, of the committee, deciding whether or not we should spend. Now, sometimes, you know, we spend a lot of time at home reading the packet and make a decision there. We come to the council and we have our committee meeting and we know whether or not we're going to vote yes or no. But the members of the public, and you heard tonight, the council heard tonight how important it is that we have citizen comment to make our decision whether or not we're going to support it. So we sometimes argue about whether or not a bid is correct. Members of the council, of the committee, discuss whether or not a minority bidder has been given the proper chance, whether or not a bid, we should take the low bid. Members of the council who are not on the committee really don't have much input when we come to the council. They pretty much find that the committee has done its homework and we move on. They support it. But I do think members of the council pay a lot of attention in their packet. And so I think the committee provides a back and forth and a good study and a good conversation and a good debate where it's necessary. It's not always necessary, but we deal with things, we deal with fire trucks and things that cost $500,000. We deal with projects. We didn't have the Robert Crown. That was taken off and made a special order of business. But in the past, over the years, there weren't all these special orders of business. And I think making so many items a special order of business has been a mistake in this administration. However, that's the way it is. So everything now is going to be really treated more or less as a special order of business. If we were to eliminate the Administration and Public Works Committee, I think the mayor sent a special letter to the council tonight because his plane was canceled, so he couldn't be here. I don't think he's had enough experience to know how important the Administration and Public Works Committee is. And I think maybe some members of the council think it would speed up the meeting. Maybe it would. But you know what? The public's business shouldn't be rushed. And so shame on us for wanting to rush the public's business. Be quicker. If you think it takes up too much time, then maybe you shouldn't be on Administration and Public Works. Administration and Public Works starts at 6 o'clock. You don't have to come at 6 o'clock. Wait and come to P&D. It doesn't start until after Administration and Public Works. That would be my suggestion. Let me give you an example of why Administration and Public Works shouldn't be, another reason, shouldn't be canceled. Let's take P&D. P&D has items on it that have already, in many cases, been to DAPR. So things have been fleshed out at DAPR. They go frequently to Zoning Board of Appeals. Sometimes they go to the Plan Commission. They have public hearings. Many items that have been that come to P&D have had several public hearings. They get dragged out at P&D. They get dragged out at Zoning Board of Appeals. They have neighborhood meetings. You rarely have an item at AMPW that's been to a public hearing in the neighborhood. It's a one-time shot when it comes to AMPW, and we want to take that out of AMPW where people get a chance to come and hear it. We're spending all your money. At P&D, that's where we raise money from developers, from rentals, from all sorts of things. But at AMPW, we're spending your tax dollars big time. We need to have an opportunity to air that. Talk about transparency. How many times? That word is getting to be so hackneyed. You need to have transparency, and this is a good example of sweeping things under the rug. And I don't want to be offensive or anything to the members of the council who want this, but when you think about it, we're really taking away some level of transparency here. So I'm going to argue that this committee just move on quickly to the next item and not remove this from the council, from being a standing committee. Standing committees are very formal and very important, and we should not remove a standing committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Rady. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you, and I agree that we should keep the APW committee. It seems that the committee's been working much more efficiently and quickly, so I think that makes that's appreciated, of course, for everybody. I think given the I guess newly developed efficiencies, we should start the P&D meeting, schedule that earlier so that we don't have any big gaps, waiting time, which has been occurring lately. So I would suggest that we keep APW, maybe start P&D at perhaps, I'm just throwing this out, 6:45. And I also don't think we should have an end time for the council meetings. I don't know if there's any support for that, but, rolling things over, particularly if people are showing up for a meeting, I don't think they want to sit around until 10:45 and then realize their thing's not going to get called and have to show up again. So that's my 2 cents on those respective points.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman
anything that gets discussed at Administration of Public Works that has a no vote gets discussed at council anyway. So I don't necessarily agree with Alderman Rainey, but I see your point. I think the real important thing would be setting a start time for council meetings and having planning and development be noticed early enough that if Administration of Public Works gets done quickly, that we can go seamlessly into planning and development so that we're not having 20-minute gaps between committees because of the Open Meetings Act. So what I think maybe we should, rather than eliminating Administration of Public Works, we should work on trying to figure out a time to start council meetings that we could publish that gives us enough room, and a time to post planning and development that, I mean, we always start later than the posted time, but you can't start earlier. So maybe we do 6:30, something like that. I mean, for P&D, and then, you know, if it happens to be later, that gives more people an opportunity to be here. But I think the real problem is the Administration of Public Works runs a little bit long, then we take a break, then planning and development goes, take a little break before council, the mayor comes here. I'm sorry that he's not here today. I'd like to talk about maybe ways we could tighten up the front end of meetings, perhaps do proclamations and so forth at one specific meeting a month rather than every meeting. Perhaps clerk's comments could be reserved for one meeting a month. You know, city manager comments, ways to get from the declaration of a quorum or the roll call to actual business more quickly. I think, you know, the public comment, we need to find a way to, however we structure it, start our business 45 minutes after the start of public comment, regardless of how we split up public comment. So I think the real issue on this agenda item is less about discontinuing Administration of Public Works and more about being more efficient in our work so that we can get things done. We don't have to carry over agenda items. And so what I'd be most supportive of is us figuring out a reasonable time to set for the start of council meetings and try and stick to that.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fleming, followed by Alderman Nguyen.
Yeah, so reading back this, and this was a long time ago, I think we started this conversation when we first got the consent agenda started, which has helped a lot with AP&W. I am not on P&D, but I am aware that sometimes there's a gap between AP&W and P&D, and so I do like if we could suggest P&D start. Obviously, if we have a start time, and AP&W is longer, then council members and the community know that we need a little extra time. But so essentially, I do agree. I do think, even though I'm one who would say let's have less meetings, I do agree that that committee, since we do spend money, particularly in this time of government where people tend to be a little less trusting, to keep that one as it stands, it's important for people to have a better understanding of, you know, when we spend money and why. But I would like us in time to council, and maybe if we could be more efficient with making sure public comment was 45 minutes, making sure people understood how to sign up in advance so we don't have as many people running up at the end saying, you know, they didn't sign up or what have you, then we don't necessarily need to have a stop time, but we are just getting to the business much faster. It's very hard, at least for me, to make decisions and hold conversation too much after 11:30. It's also, I think, unfair for citizens who do want to come and participate to be required to stay so late at night. So I appreciate the suggestions Alderman Sufferman made regarding when we do proclamations and you know, the special orders of business. I felt like we committed last year to kind of sticking to our schedule for city council, and now I feel like we're getting back to being here every Monday night because we do have so many special orders of business that require an entire meeting. So if we can be, as they said, more efficient and setting calendars and then sticking to our own calendars, maybe we won't have to have these very firm stop times because we're just getting to what we need to get to a little bit better. So all that to say, I would agree to keep AP&W, make a start time for P&D. I would be open to a stop time for City Council if we understood we were going to be able to start before 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in consensus with the discussion here. I do think that with the changes in AP&W, that I think it has become more efficient. and I do agree that it needs to continue to be a committee. I think that moving it, as Alderman Wilson said, that moving the start of P&D to 6:45 is a good idea. And if occasionally P&D has to be pushed back because there is some singular item at ANPW that takes a little longer, that's better than always having the gap of time. But I think also having the end time of recognizing that APNW is going to be 45 minutes, it helps tighten up the discussion as well. And then if we have a firm time for the start of City Council, we can do that. I know that's a struggle because P&D, it really it alters depending on whether we have a large development or not. I think it would be helpful to the community. I'm not in favor of having a stop time. Some things just need more discussion, and I think if we can continue to tighten up the agendas, we won't be here past midnight very often. Some of it is just we're a community that really has a lot of discussion, and especially now. So that I agree with keeping ANPW and continuing to find the efficiencies in the schedule.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. And I guess if I could add to the conversation, I would also agree to keep it the same. And as well, I would use this as an opportunity really to thank the members of the APNW community. I think that with the new changes, it does make the meetings more efficient. The committee definitely takes the time to read through the packet, and we come prepared to make decisions. And on the things that need to be discussed, we're prepared to discuss them as well. I think Alderman Rainey hit on the big buzzword, which is transparency, and I would be surprised if any member of our frequent flyer club would be in favor of eliminating that committee, and I think that just opens us up to more criticism given the fact that we spend over $300+ million that passes through that committee every 2 weeks. So Alderman Wilson, we have one more comment from Alderman Rainey. Were you going to make a motion? Okay. Alderman Rainey?
Yeah.
Throughout the year, during the course of the year. Yes, during the course of the year. We thank you for that clarification, Alderman Wilson.
Not 300 million every.
It's been a long day.
Although with our new transfer tax, we might. We had a really nice sale this past week. The rule is very clear regarding the starting of the City Council meeting, and it's been implemented incorrectly. And we've talked about this before. The mayor allocates, divided by 45, the number of people who are here. However, the rule says that the council meeting shall begin 45 minutes after citizen comment begins. It does not say that the number of people shall, be divided by 45. It says it shall begin. So, if you have 100 people and he divides, they're not going to be finished in 45 minutes, no matter, how many seconds he gives each person, because just walking up to the podium is going to take longer than the amount of time he gives them. So if we impose that rule, there's no way we're going to begin 45 minutes after citizen comment begins. But that is the council rule, that it begins at that time. And so that would allow us to begin our council meetings at a reasonable hour. Our council meetings, by virtue of his allocating a certain amount of time, sometimes do not begin until 10 or after. So, if we really are serious about beginning at a reasonable hour, we're going to have a conversation about that.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. You want to make a motion?
Okay, so just listening to everybody's comments, I will propose the following. I'm going to, I guess, break it into a couple of motions. The first one would be I move that we keep the ANPW committee and that we commence noticing the Planning Development Committee meeting at 6:30 and the council meeting at 7. I'll have some more thoughts to share on, is that?
Yeah, it's been properly moved.
Well, I think it's ambitious, but I think, you know, I don't want to have lag time. So I guess we're currently noticing council at 7:15, and P&D at 6:30, and council at 7.
And council at the conclusion of P&D.
Or conclusion of P&D.
No, there's no fixed time.
There's no fixed time, but don't we say no sooner than?
No.
No.
Conclusion of P&D.
If you do 6:45, I think amend your motion to 6:45. That may make more sense.
Fine. Conclusion of P&D is fine. So 6:30 for P&D and council for the conclusion of P&D.
Would you say 6:45, I think, is the norm?
I'm okay with 6:45. I was just kind of listening. So
Perfect.
okay, so I will move that we keep APW and that we notice planning and development for 6:45, and council will commence at the conclusion of planning development.
Perfect. Is there a second for that motion? It's been properly moved and seconded, seeing no additional lights, no comments. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
All right, and I will also move that we decline to set a stop time for the council meetings. It's in the packet.
Well, I think we had originally
for action.
discussed talking about it at midnight, calling it quits with a...
And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, again, all these are recommendations to the City Council.
Yep.
So, you know, there are, if you wish to not take action on anything, you're merely not taking action on a recommendation to the City Council. So.
Okay, so fine.
So we don't need a
Never
motion.
mind.
All right. Seeing no additional lights for item 4, or are we on item 5 now? Yeah, I felt like we combined.
5 then.
Yeah.
So let's make sure there are no additional items for comments for item 4. Seeing none. Item 5, amending the council rules, change start time for planning development. That was already taken care of with the previous motion. Seeing no additional comments, we'll now move into item 6, consideration and amendment of the City Council rules for public comment at standing committees.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, on your packet, page number 15 is a recommended change to Council Rule 6.1. Currently, that language states as follows: any citizen may address a committee at the invitation of the chair of the committee. Official public hearings for citizens shall allow for comments by the City Council and citizens. And staff is recommending a new language for Rule 6.1, which states City Council standing committees shall provide opportunities for citizen comment at the beginning of each meeting. If there are 5 or fewer speakers, 10 minutes shall be provided for public comment. If there are more than 5 speakers, a period of 20 minutes shall be provided for all comment, and no individual shall speak longer than 2 minutes. The committee chair will allocate time among the speakers to ensure public comment does not exceed 20 minutes. The business of the committee shall commence 20 minutes after the beginning of public comment. In addition, the Planning and Development Committee shall allow an additional 20 minutes of public comment for each plan development application following the guidelines above prior to the item being heard by the committee.
Okay. I have one light, Alderman Wilson, followed by Alderman Fleming. Alderman Wilson, followed by Alderman Ravel.
Okay, thank you. So I think this is a good idea. I understand the points that members of the community have made, but in conjunction with the conversation we just had about the duration of the meeting, and granted, I was reading this on a phone from a long ways away, but my understanding from a recent Attorney General opinion was that in the absence of something to the contrary, the interpretation would be that the council rules would apply, so it would be 45 minutes per standing committee. So that would put us at close to 3 hours, or I guess 2.5 hours for a, whatever it is, 3 45-minute periods. I don't feel like doing the math. That's an awfully long time in one night for citizen comment. So given the fact that there is an opportunity at the council meeting the same night, I think this does make some sense, and I also appreciate that with regard to the planning development, that we have this for plan development applications the additional amount of time, because I do recognize that more conversation needs to occur on those occasions. So I support this and think that this makes sense, and it's certainly not an attempt to limit our input, but when I kind of was perusing other communities, I was seeing things like, for example, Rockford has, I think, a maximum of 5 speakers, at 3 minutes apiece for a meeting, and that's 15 minutes for
Right.
a city much larger than ours. So I think we're pretty open to the comment process, but we have to ensure that there's enough time to get the work done and have the conversations while people are here to hear what we're talking about.
Right. Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Fleming?
To Mike, trying to think how to say this. So this part about the Planning and Development Committee, which I actually don't even sit on, but allowing an extra 20 minutes for public comment seems like a whole lot. Am I reading this correctly? Right, the last sentence is, in addition, the Public Planning and Development Committee shall allow an additional 20 minutes of public comment for each application following the guidelines. Am I reading that correctly? So that means 20 minutes. So if we have
plan development.
Each plan. So if we have a night where we have 2 planned developments, that's an additional 20 minutes that's not accounted for in the 45 minutes?
Should we change that to up to? Because clearly we don't take, we'll deal with that at the passing, but we could say up to, if that's your point.
Well, I'm just trying to understand if this is up to 20 minutes for one planned development, but that's part of our 45 minutes?
No. This would be at the committee. So the plan development, under this particular rule, P&D would have 20 minutes every meeting, and then an additional 20 minutes for a total of 40 minutes for when there are plan development applications before the committee.
So would that mean that we would set the agenda so that we only have one planned development per meeting, per agenda?
No, I don't think it would, because of timing. I don't think you can make that restriction.
Well, if you're giving 20 minutes.
Of when we have plan developments come through, I don't want to say there's never been 2 on an agenda, but it's not standard.
Rare.
Very, very rare. I can't even think of one, just because of the length of time that they take up in public comment. We usually just do 1 per meeting.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Alderman Ravel?
Well, it seems to me that there are other instances besides planned developments where a large group of residents have a lot to say. And just thinking most recently at P&D, we had the neighbors who wanted to speak about the 2626 Reese Avenue project. And so I guess when I think about how that discussion happens at P&D, we give the developer or the applicant time to make a special presentation that's not part of the public comment, and I think the residents deserve an opportunity also to give some kind of, to have more time really to lay out their arguments about the proposal. So, and I know everybody's going to cringe here. So I guess I would suggest that we say something about at P&D an additional 20 minutes of public comment for each application for a plan development, map amendment, major zoning variation, and subdivision following the guidelines above. So that, because those are the times when we're likely to get a presentation from the applicant, and that the residents might have quite a bit to say about it as well. So that would be my suggestion. What? So what I'm doing is I'm
sorry, what I said was still within that 40 minutes.
It would still be no more. It would be adding additional opportunities, not just for planned developments, that they would get the extra 20 minutes.
Then we need that. I think that throws everything we just talked about out the window, because
basically, it seems to me that staff is very helpful in terms of not loading a P&D agenda with more than one big issue, whether it's a planned development or a project like the Reese Avenue project. We really try to spread those out, so we're not having them more than one of those at a particular meeting.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We have Alderman, let me see if that was Fisk next, followed by Alderman Rainey, then myself and Alderman Wood. I saw your.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Well, I share Alderman Fleming's concern because of the way that this is written. It says that the Planning and Development Committee shall allow an additional 20 minutes of public comment for each planned development application. If we expand that to include subdivisions or whatever, then how... It seems to me that one person then could sign up to speak at each individual segment. So you could have some person possibly speaking, 6, 9, 12 minutes. Actually, it's 2 minutes, so it would be 2, 4, 6, 8 minutes. And I think we would want to try to control that a little bit. I think we're making this a lot more complicated than it really needs to be.
I would agree.
I think I'm actually fine with the if we want to say 45 minutes at P&D and leaving it at 2 minutes per person, and then if a developer or someone wants to have a special presentation, they would clear that with the chair at some point 4 or 5 days in advance, so that we all knew that that was coming. But I think it sounds very confusing to the public, and I can see the public coming and saying, well, what really is the difference between subdivision on Reese or some other issue as opposed to a planned development? So I just think we're making things much murkier than they need to be.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk. And if I can chime in and then go to Alderman Rainey, followed by Alderman Nguyen. I would agree, and I would say to the public as well as the members of the committee, I think I truly value the work that we do on the committee for 2 reasons. A, it's the best opportunity for engagement. So just in contrast to what we heard earlier, and I say this to a couple of people, Ray, Claire, and the other folks that are out there in the public, that our committees allow for that conversation. And I think that's where the real work takes place at the committee level, when we have an opportunity not only to listen but also respond to some of the comments. So by the time it does come to City Council, unless it's a special order of business, it's already been vetted. As you've said, Ray, sometimes we have conversations months, even up to a year, on particular developments. And out of all the committees, I think P&D is where we have the lengthiest conversation. And unless I'm over-exaggerating, I think that those are managed pretty well by our staff and the chairperson, with the exception of those larger developments that require more conversation. So I'm a little concerned. I don't sit on P&D, but I think for someone to have to micromanage all these components does get a little bit confusing. We know that when the council chamber is full every 2 or 3 times during the years, that it's going to be a lengthy meeting, and outside of that, I think they're run pretty efficiently. So I would agree with Alderman Fisk to kind of leave it the way it is without making it more confusing. Alderman Rainey, followed by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Rainey passes. Alderman Nguyen.
Well, initially I liked this proposal from the staff, but then I do think Alderman Fisk brings up a good point, because, and Alderman Revelle brings up a good point, because we do have issues that come before P&D that have these natural constituencies, where neighbors or communities do sort of speak with one voice, and they have a counter proposal or a counter presentation. And with PUDs, we actually have a legally designated group within a certain distance that actually have legal standing, special legal standing before us. So if we, and having to parse through whether you're, whether this is a PUD or whether this is a map amendment, and those are significant issues that do bring people out, I think is difficult. So I do think perhaps keeping it at 45 minutes with maybe a 2-minute limit on folks, and then within that 45 minutes, allowing the chair to allocate time for presentations for any of the various interest groups that come forward, whether it's a PUD or whether it's a map amendment. I think that makes some sense and would make sense to the public, especially if we put it into this, somehow or other worded it correctly. I'm a little bit too tired to figure that out right now. So I would agree that we keep it at 45 minutes and give discretion to the chair. And if we could put something in the rules saying that if there is a particular group that has a presentation to make, that they get a certain period of time. What is someone? So that's what I think that over the years at P&D, we do have those groups that, and also then that consolidates people's comments, and they can present a more in-depth argument one way or the other in support of their issue.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to back up a minute and just remind everyone that the reason why we're doing this was because the AG said that in the absence of rules for standing committees, that the council rules prevail, which means that at each standing committee, according to the AG, we should have been doing 45 minutes of public comment at every standing committee, and we've never followed that. It's sort of been up to the discretion of the chair for the standing committee. So this is a good thing that we're doing, and we need to do that. But we, besides P&D, and I absolutely, as I said before, agree with the 45 minutes for P&D, we need to be dealing with the other standing committees as well. And considering the December 3rd meeting, for example, where we had a Rules Committee scheduled for an hour that night, if we had actually taken 45 minutes for, which the AG said we should have taken, that would have allowed 15 minutes for the 15 agenda items that we had that night in order to meet the start time of Human Services that followed immediately upon Rules. So that obviously is not manageable at all. So it's really important that we go back and we do establish these rules. I just wanted to make sure that tonight we address each one of the standing committees separately, so we're not defaulting to 45 minutes for every committee, especially when we have them stacked up.
Thank you. I think comment, motion, is that fine?
I've got a comment too, but I was going to point out.
Alderman Wilson, followed by Alderman Nguyen.
And Alderman Fisk, actually, this does address all the standing committees, so it's not just the one or two. It says all the city council, all the standing committees shall provide citizen comment. Yeah. And it sets at that 20-minute period, so it eliminates that.
No, I understand that. It's just that we had been talking about 45 minutes at P&D. I just wanted to raise the question that I don't think that's an appropriate time for all of the standing committees.
I agree, yes. Totally agree. Yeah. So, right, and I personally I would like to try the way it's drafted now. So that's going to be my motion. So I move that we adopt this recommended language, and I understand the point about the P&D. But the chair does have discretion to allow presentations, and historically that's the way we've done those things. I know that for the bigger projects, there have been pro and con presentations, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think that gives people more of an opportunity to spend some time, come up with a cohesive, plan and argument and materials, get those circulated, sometimes even get that into a packet. And I think that's probably even a more fair way and a better opportunity for people to participate in something that is a big impact item. And that's the case regardless of whether it's a plan development or not. So I think, with this change, with the additional time available and with the chair's discretion to allow the additional presentations, I'd like to give that a try. And, we just voted on compressing the time frame. So, scheduling public comment at 45 minutes, which is in excess of the amount that we just scheduled this meeting start times, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I would move that we adopt the recommended language.
So is that the total language without having to read through it? Everyone's clear on the first two paragraphs? That's why I'm asking for clarification.
I'm moving that we do it as it's drafted.
Well, I understand that, but in the second paragraph, it only describes plan development applications.
Right.
So would you?
Right, I'm sorry.
And I want to leave it that. I don't want to add in like all the map amendments and all these other things.
I'm just going to knock and make sure we're following order. So there's a motion on the table to adopt the recommended language as it's spelled out in the first two paragraphs on page 15. Is there a second for discussion?
I can second it.
For discussion purposes? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded. Alderman Wilson. By Alderman Fisk.
I mean, I don't know if nobody wants to do that, then let's just.
That's fine.
Move on, so.
I'm not going to support it. I think it's going to be confusing. Alderman Fisk. Seeing no further comments, Alderman Nguyen, did you want to say something?
Well, okay. Can I make a motion with respect to?
You would have to withdraw, or we would have to vote on the motion that.
Okay.
It's been.
I withdrew my motion.
It's been properly withdrew. Alderman Phillips, so we're back to neutral. Is there an
Okay.
alternate?
So I would like to make a motion that we adopt the recommended language, the first paragraph, to apply to Rules Committee and ANPW.
Human Services.
All standing committees? Would you?
No, what, pardon?
Human Services.
All standing committees?
No, but I except for P&D, thank you.
Okay.
All standing committees except for P&D.
Okay. Except for P&D.
Right, yes, thank you.
So everyone's clear? So the motion is? No, the motion is,
The motion is to adopt the 20-minute, if there are 5 or fewer speakers, 10 minutes shall be provided for public comment. If there are more than 5 speakers, a period of 20 minutes. Right. So have that public comment apply to all standing committees except P&D, and that we have a separate provision regarding public comment at P&D. So that's my motion.
it's been properly moved and seconded. We're not there yet.
I think we should then move on to what because I think as we've been discussing, P&D is different than these other committees. And so we should have something different for P&D. Yes.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just remind the committee that these are all recommendations to the City Council.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
So I'll speak. I mean, I think with the exception of P&D, all the other committees run pretty efficiently. I feel like as someone who's had to chair these meetings in the past, that would add a layer of complexity that would be difficult for me or anyone chairing the meeting to keep track of. So I'm not going to support this motion as it relates to changing the other committees and putting restrictions on the time limits.
But then we default back to 45 minutes of public comment.
Up to. I mean, I don't think we can change it to up to, and I think that pretty much takes care of any issues. We don't have to go the whole 45, just up to 45, if we need to. Can we change it? That's what I'm asking.
That's what
We're trying to do here.
Okay. So if someone wants to float the recommendation, we'll float it, and then we'll have to have it again at council. So we either leave it the way it is, or...
Wait, the motion,
yeah. You said it's been properly...
There's a
okay.
motion on the floor.
And then Alderman Ravel has her light on. Any other lights? Alderman Ravel? Motion, sorry.
So, Mike, I have a question for you, Alderman Braithwaite. So, I agree that it's complicated for the chair to have to think about, the 5 speakers versus the more than 5 speakers and the 10 minutes and then another 10. So, could we just just limit it to 20 minutes at all the standing committees except P&D, but not worry about when it tips over from 10 minutes to 20 minutes?
I think you could vote no on the current motion, and then we would have to do a re-motion unless someone wants to take it as a friendly amendment. Alderman Fisk to the motion.
Yeah,
followed by Alderman Rainey.
What Alderman Ravel said makes sense to me.
Yeah.
20 minutes, 2 minutes per person.
Yep.
That's the end. I mean, that's fair.
So
that's simple and easy to keep track of.
Yes.
I am willing to can I do this, amend my motion to substitute what Alderman Ravel just said?
I would. Sounds like there's a second and a consensus. Alderman Rainey?
20 minutes with 2 minutes a person.
I would agree.
Can't hear you, Ann.
It's 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes is over.
Perfect.
20 minutes and 2 minutes.
20 minutes and 2 minutes each.
There you go.
I'll second that motion.
All right. So the motion we're going to move forward with is 20 minutes, 2 minutes per speaker. All those in favor?
No.
No more than 2 minutes. Don't say 2 minutes per speaker. 20 citizen comment less. No.
No, you got to limit.
It has to be 2 minutes.
Has to be 2 minutes.
Right. Because otherwise you have one person speak for 20 minutes, Ann.
Yeah.
That's happened.
Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, 20 minutes, 2 minutes per person, please signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for the fruitful discussion. It passes.
Okay, now we've got
All right.
P&D.
Oh, Jesus, yes. Alderman Fisk, move us forward.
You make it, June.
Yes, I move that the P&D citizen comment be 45 minutes, 2 minutes per speaker.
Period.
That's it.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded as it relates to P&D. 45 minutes, 2 minutes per speaker. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion moves forward. And these are all recommendations that will come back to City Council.
And Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification.
Thank you, sir.
That the language that was included, the business of the committee shall commence 20 minutes after the beginning of public comment, so that would work for all the committees. So
Yes.
for the 20 minutes after the beginning of public comments and 45 minutes after the beginning of public comment for P&D, just to be clear. Thank you.
Roger that. All right. Item number 7, motions to hold, I think there should be versus tabling an item.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the Rules Committee asked for an explanation of the difference. There's a memorandum on page 16 of your packet from the Corporation Counsel and myself. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do you mind summing this up just for the public?
Ms. Mason-Cup?
Thank you. That's why I asked her.
There is no action.
There is no
Okay,
action. so
move
we'll just
approval.
summarize
Let's
it.
move on.
Can you summarize? It's come up before, just so we're clear, and hopefully we won't have to revisit it. Thank you.
Good evening, Michelle Mason, Cup City Attorney. This request came, I believe, from Alderman Ruth Simmons. She had asked for a clarification on the difference between a motion to table and the motion to hold. And this has become relevant in a few discussions where a previous item has been held and it cannot be held again. And most recently has been the motion to table has been used. And so this memo addresses the difference between the two and when you can use each motion.
Perhaps we should hold this to the next Rules Committee when she's here? Oh, we can't hold it. It's a special meeting.
Yeah.
If the committee would like to table the item for the next committee meeting, you may do that. That would be on June the 3rd.
There you go.
Oh, Jesus, you gotta love it. Gotta love it. All right.
Or we can merely
there are
make
further
sure that
questions,
Alderman
we can
Simmons
put it
is
on the
aware
future agenda.
that this
How about
was
that?
discussed by the committee.
Yes.
If she wishes to bring it back,
Yes,
she
you can
do
bring it back. Thank you to keep us moving forward. All right.
I have my light on.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay. And I
Alderman
just wanted to provide clarification. So I actually asked for this to be on because Alderman Ruth Simmons had asked to hold something, and she was asked to give an explanation as to why she needed to hold. And so then there was a discussion about if an explanation was needed when an alderperson asked to hold something, to just provide more context as to when this came up.
I feel like that's a separate question.
Well, that was why it was put on the agenda.
No, clear.
So I don't think that we
Just-
need to, I mean, she'll watch the meeting, I'm sure, but that was the issue. She asked to hold something, I seconded it. We came to council and there was a discussion asking her why she held it. And that had not been something that I experienced before. I was under the impression if someone held it, then it was held. There did not need to be an explanation. So that was why I asked for it to be there.
And Alderman Fleming, members of the committee, on page 17 is the language for the hold, and it says in the second or third sentence, an alderman may ask either the city manager or the alderman requesting the holdover to explain the impact of the holdover at the time the holdover is requested. So
Right, but that's
practice is-
impact. But they asked her why she held it. They didn't ask what the impact was.
And again, if the council wishes to amend this to make it clearer, the practice has been that question normally is not raised. You know, it's up to the council, I think, at this point.
It's clear as it is. I'm just making a citation for remembrance that was I asked.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
Actually, the question had nothing to do with holding. The question I asked was, why did you abstain?
No, that was when the mayor asked her why she held something.
Oh.
That wasn't
Right. Two separate issues. Right. So for clarification, if one abstains, you do have to provide a reason per council rules. In the hold, you don't need an explanation. However, you can ask, we do need clarification if the hold has an impact on the contract.
I got it.
No, just for clarification. Everyone good? Order of business? All right.
Very good.
We will move forward.
Forward.
All right, thank you all. And 7:15, we're doing all right. Item number 8, Ethics Subcommittee Report, Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. We have my 45-page PowerPoint queued up. We will be meeting again on April 22nd, and at that time, we've done a good bit of work. The Corporation Council has their attorneys have prepared some a good starting draft. So we made some comments at the last committee meeting, and those are being revised. The expectation is that we will be presented with something that's close to a final product on the 22nd. We will review that and make any additional necessary changes, and whatever we come with at the conclusion of that meeting will be presented to the committee for consideration and hopefully adoption. And the next meeting is going to be April 22nd at 4:15 p.m. in the Aldermanic Library.
All right, thank you very much for your report. Seeing no questions, we'll just keep that on verbal file. Item number 10, hiring process for the city manager role.
And, Mr. Chair, before I get to that, item 9 regarding the Equity and Empowerment
that's right.
Commission, they had requested an opportunity to come before the Rules Committee this evening. There's a couple of matters that they wish to discuss. They've asked that they would wait one additional meeting before they come back. So they will be on your agenda for June 3rd.
Thank you. I didn't mean to skip over that.
Lastly, the council asked for a memorandum regarding the hiring process for a city manager. A memorandum is in your packet starting on page 18. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to briefly walk through it, or if you'd just like to answer any questions.
I think it's pretty straightforward. If you want to just give us a high-level overview of the bullet points, and then we can open it up to any questions or comments.
Certainly. It outlines 5 steps. The first would be the selection of an interim city manager. Once the position was vacant, the council has the ability to make an interim appointment from among city staff or make an outside appointment. The second point would be to hire an executive search firm. Certainly, that has been the practice in Evanston in the past. Certainly, if communities our size and complexity, that would be something that would make sense to move forward with. The third point would be to develop parameters for the search process, specifically the involvement of the city council making all decisions, or if a subcommittee would be utilized to assist the recruiter through the process, decisions regarding community meetings for input on qualities desired in the next city manager, issues regarding when candidates' name would be released to the public, the process for reviewing candidates. Point 4 would be the time frame for a selection process. Once the job announcement is released, search firm will usually receive applications over a 30 to 45-day period. The firm will then usually take 21 to 28 days to prepare a group of candidates for the council to review, and then first interviews usually occur 14 to 21 days after that. Once the council's made a selection, a negotiated contract would occur, would have to be approved by the city council in open session, and after that, a selected candidate would usually report to work 30 to 60 days after approval of the contract.
I move that we accept and place on file. Oh, I'm sorry.
Alderman Sufferton.
Okay.
And then
I just want to jump in. I think we should establish like a community input meeting within a certain amount of time after a vacancy. Yeah, I mean, we would go through hiring a search firm, all that, but I think it would be important, and I wish the mayor were here so we could talk about that. I mean, he'd be the appropriate person, or whoever the mayor is, to convene that meeting, but maybe have it understood that upon a vacancy there'd be a community meeting, within 15 days, 20. I don't know what the appropriate amount of time is, but the question about when there'd be community input, would it be at the end when they're a finalist? Would it be I think having a rule or something in our policy that would be, we're having a meeting with community input for the types of candidates they would like early in the process, whatever, 21 days, 14 days, whatever's appropriate after there's a vacancy. That's the only thing I would add to this. Other than that, I'm done.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it makes sense to put that right at the beginning. Just reading through this really quickly. Certainly before hiring the executive search firm, I mean, I think we need to inform our interviews with executive search firms as to what the community expectations are. So I would say upon receipt of that a vacancy has occurred, that we immediately set forth a public process to get comments from the community.
And so what I think I'm hearing, and similar to what we did with our chief police, we had at least one community meeting where we invited members of our respective wards to come out. One meeting, Parasol Room, listen to things that were important to them, and the search firm was present. And I think it's important to note that that search firm was hired prior to that community meeting, right? Just so everyone's clear on that, so they can listen. Okay, just for a point of clarification.
And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, conceivably you might want two meetings. From what I'm hearing the council say is that perhaps you would have an initial meeting that would go through a process, and then once you had a firm selected, maybe have them conduct a meeting that talks about qualities when you're dealing with the job description. So I think that they serve different purposes as long as they're done expeditiously. I don't think that they would slow the process down. But if your concern is to get input on the very front end, I think that's a different kind of meeting than a meeting on the qualities. Because for those of you who attended the meeting for the chief of police, it was a very different kind of meeting, and I think you wouldn't want to take away from that discussion and honestly give people an opportunity to start thinking. And a first community meeting perhaps would allow people to begin those thought processes, and they would become better prepared to a second meeting.
And I was thinking about two meetings, not one.
Okay. Is there someone want to make the motion to amend, and then we can...
With the first community meeting, I mean, I've been through this several times. I don't see us organizing a community meeting for the purpose of establishing qualities in a city manager without having first hired a search firm. That we're paying a search firm who's done this before, and I think it ought to be organized. I don't see us handling that. I think we know the people, how to reach out, but I don't think we're the ones who ought to handle that meeting. I mean, I don't want to see our staff handling it. I don't want to see, I want somebody who really knows how to organize something like that to do that.
I think I'd agree with that.
I think we should have several meetings like that, but I don't think we should organize it.
Understood. Alderman Fisk?
And it is on the chart of things to do. It's, develop parameters of search process. And it's B, will the city directs recruiter to host a community meeting, first community meeting.
Yep. Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Alderman Rainey, but I think things have changed in the past 10 years in terms of what expectations our community has for public input into the process. And I think we need to do everything that we can to listen to them at the very beginning of the process and then start it, and then start through the deliberative step-by-step process that follows. But I think if we don't do that, we'd be making a mistake.
So
what you think different people would, I'm not sure.
I think it's what would be expected. I think we have a very engaged population, and they would expect to be involved at the beginning. I think ultimately that's going to help us manage the process a little bit better by
I don't
being
think
more
I-
engaged
yeah,
at the
okay,
beginning.
Okay, I don't think this is really the time to.
Okay.
Okay, whatever. I'd like to see what other communities are doing today.
So right now, as it stands, I think we have an outline in front of us. I don't think there's a question of
Yeah, I
how
don't think
many
we're
meetings,
experts
or
at
we need
this.
to
That's what I'm saying.
answer
We're
that
not
now, but the
experts at
fact
this.
is it's baked into the
Yeah.
process for everyone to see.
Yeah.
Seeing no additional lights, are we,
So we're leaving this as is? Are we vote, is this a vote? I'm sorry.
I think we just accept and put
This
on
is
file.
an outline.
It's an outline.
Yeah, I think we ought to do some research. We're not experts.
It's been a motion, it's been properly moved and seconded that we receive the report. Seeing no additional lights, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Who said no? Okay, Alderman Fisk. Any items for new business? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
No, no.
I'm sorry.
Can I just ask for a quick point of clarification on the public speaking? Are you just talking about the standing committees, not for city council meetings?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. No change. Clerk Reed?
Yes, I have an item of new business for the next meeting. Sorry, I'm a bit sick. But to address, we don't have an Open Meetings Act designee. The committee has designated the committee as a whole, but not an individual. And so the committee should designate some individual as the Open Meetings Act designee.
What's the problem we're trying to solve?
Legally, we're mandated to have a designated Open Meetings Act designee.
Isn't that Corporation Counsel? Don't they help?
Just as we have a FOIA officer, which the clerk serves as the FOIA officer, there's to be an Open Meetings Act designee or officer, and we don't have an individual named in that
Can
position.
Ms. Mason Cup be there?
The committee could name Ms. Mason Cup as the designee.
I nominate her.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion that maybe you forward the language? It's not on the agenda.
Yeah,
so
I
nothing
was
for us
looking
to
to this
take.
for new business for the next meeting, for
Right,
April 3rd.
and in the
to bring up.
meantime,
Yeah.
can you forward the language to our Corporation Counsel, and then if there's something that requires a decision, we'll probably put it on the agenda?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Clerk Reed. All right, seeing no other items for new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
No, don't we have an executive session?
We have to adjourn the meeting before we get to that. This is what this page.
Oh,
Move
that's
adjournment.
right. We're not in a council meeting.
Yeah. All right. Seeing that I read the agenda, is there a motion?
I thought you were the mayor.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been properly moved. Is there a second? There's a second. All those in favor of adjourning the Rules Committee meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Perfect. The meeting is adjourned.